what Cotality have done is they've built out two special home price measures that track properties above and below eligibility for the expanded 5% deposit scheme. And they've generated a back series so you can see how they perform over time. And essentially what the data was showing is that from the announcement of the expanded scheme, the lower end, or the properties that were eligible, started outperforming, and that outperformance seems to have widened through to the end of 2025, such that they rose 3.6% in the December quarter compared to a 2.4% rise for properties that were ineligible for the scheme.
So, Eliza, that's a difference of around 1.2% price growth, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a 120 basis point gap. It seems to have widened as we got towards the end of the year, and it ranges across the capital cities. There's a notable difference, for example, in Sydney, where there was an uplift in home values eligible for the scheme, and those ineligible actually saw a mild decline in the December quarter.
So the federal government, when it expanded this policy last year, it did point to Treasury modelling that, yes, it might push up prices overall by 6 years by just 0.5%. Is that modelling now being called into question?
To be honest, I think we can't understand the full impact of the scheme until we get more data, such as take up by first home buyers from Housing Australia. And we have to remember that there are many other factors at play. If you take, I think we have a visual as well, maybe, or the graph that Cotality has released showing the monthly outperformance at the low end of the market.
Eliza, we've got this on screen right now, actually.
Fabulous. So if you take that particular data further, you can see where the green line has outperformed recently. But if you took that back a few years, you would actually see it's not uncommon for the lower end of the market, or that green line, to have outperformed throughout the past 5 years where there have been a lot of affordability pressures. You've also got things like increased investor activity where they may be targeting the lower end of the market, feasibility challenges which limit supply at the lower end of the property market, and affordability just skewing more buyers that way. Not to mention that at the end of 2025, property values started to slow down a little bit in general. That has more of an impact on the high end of the market. So that's exacerbating the performance gap as well. But I think at the end of the day, what this data is showing us, if nothing else, is that now is not the time to be throwing more finance at the low end of the market. This is only going to add fuel to the fire.
Well, the government has been saying, well, we're saving first home buyers money here. They're going to save a lot of cash if they get into the market anyway. Isn't it just possible that this policy is worth it for them?
Absolutely. For individuals, I think this could work out really well in the short term. But the problem is if you're giving access to finance, not just more access to finance, but untargeted by income, right? So very high income individuals who would have gotten into the property market anyway can now potentially access more finance to get into the market, then you're creating more pressures for first home buyers down the line because it's adding pressure to prices, pushing them higher up to the point of the threshold of the scheme. And that means that first home buyers are getting less value for money than they would have. And I think the other thing too is that this policy is illustrative of a government that is leaning into rising home values rather than trying to influence demand so that it actually cools where it's not necessary and actually helps to bring home prices lower or take pressure off the market. What this scheme relies on, because you're incentivizing people into higher levels of debt, is that you're leaning into a rising property market. And I think it's good to know the government has first home buyers in mind, but the design and implementation of the expanded scheme is a little disappointing, I think, from the perspective of the economist community.